You're listening to Romancing in Paris on Paris Underground Radio.
Hello, and welcome to the Romancing in Paris podcast. I'm your host, Lily Heise. In this podcast, we'll be traveling around the city as I pick out my top romantic spots per arrondissement. You don't have to visit these places only as a couple. Exploring them can be the expression of your own love of Paris. Are you ready to get romancing in Paris? In this episode of Romancing in Paris, we head back north across the Seine River and land in the 16th arrondissement, one of the poshest districts of Paris. Due to its elongated shape, hugging the northwest of the Seine River, the 16th sometimes seems so far from the rest of Paris. But once on the metro, it's actually not too bad of a trek. Elegance abounds virtually around every corner. The district's polished streets are rather quiet. However, there are various lovely romantic places to discover. I love the stylish Belle Epoque villa streets and the Art Nouveau architecture. There are also some excellent museums in the district, and its huge Bois de Boulogne woods have several romantic features. Nevertheless, I wanted to take you to a very special place in this episode, one which has unusual romantic roots, in addition to an exciting romantic twist involving a character we've encountered in previous episodes. Oh la la! Are you ready? Grab your chérie. We're going to the Maison de Balzac. Like other peripheral districts of the city, the land spread across what is now most of the 16th only became part of Paris in 1860. The east section of the district, closer to Trocadero and the Arc de Triomphe, saw some mid-19th century development under Haussmann, a time which also brought about the creation of the Bois de Boulogne. However, back then the southwest corner of the district was still the countryside, fields dotted with a few pastoral villages. One of these is called Passy. Some of its village vibes are still evident in the streets spread around Rue de Passy. There are still even some country houses which have survived. One of these was thankfully saved, a modest cottage nestled within a pretty garden, boasting a stunning backdrop of the Eiffel Tower. This was once the home of one of France's most influential 19th century writers, Honoré de Balzac. Before you assume I'm featuring yet another figure of the Romantic movement, this is not the case here. Although he was active at the same time, the first half of the 19th century, Balzac hadn't been wooed by the Romantics, and instead was a solid realist. However, the prolific scribe did have a romantic side, which we'll be uncovering in this episode. One of 11 children of a family from the Tarn region in the south of France, the writer's father, Bernard François Balzac, was something of a self-made man, a hard feat during the Ancien Regime. Arriving virtually penniless in Paris in 1760, within 6 years he'd become the secretary to the advisor of the king. Not bad at all. At 50, he married Balzac's mother, Anne Charlotte Laure, then aged 18. The first of the couple's 4 children, Honoré, was born in 1799. However, in those early years, the boy didn't spend much time at home. He was sent off to a wet nurse almost immediately, then to a boarding school. Both experiences proved miserable. So unhappy was his upbringing that young Honoré tried to commit suicide by jumping off a bridge. Fortunately, his attempt was unsuccessful. At the very least, his misery and childhood experiences provided him with fodder for his future writing. When he was 17, he went to study at the Sorbonne with the intent of becoming a lawyer. However, after training at the firm of a family friend, in 1819 he shunned law for literature. A very similar path to another top French writer, Jules Verne, who we discuss in episode 6 of my other podcast, Paris Cachet. He dove into this new profession seriously. Balzac became well known for his incredible work ethic, which developed into a strict routine of writing from 1 a.m. to 8 a.m. every day. His dedication proved fruitful. In the first 7 years after trying his hand at a few plays, he managed to write a whopping 9 novels. That said, these first works were often cheap fiction and scandalous in content, so much so that he penned them under pseudonyms. Even with his voracious appetite for writing, he still had time for some amour. And his first love was with Laure de Berny, double Balzac's then 22 years of age. This tendency to seek out maternal affection in his relationships, probably to compensate for the lack of it during his own childhood, was something that would reappear. His next amoureuse was the Duchess of Ambrante, whose previous suitors included Napoleon Bonaparte, an affair which was sparked when he was hired to ghostwrite her memoirs, a book which did very well. It was around this time, the end of the 1820s, that Balzac began working on his monumental opus, La Comédie Humaine, a collection of interconnected works, a study of the human condition and all aspects of society. It was a massive undertaking which totaled 91 completed works, from novels to essays, and 46 unfinished pieces. Of this collection were some of his first major successes, including La Peau de Chagrin, The Wild Ass's Skin, and Eugénie Grandet, his first bestseller, which was inspired by another lover, fellow writer Maria du Fresnay. Married to a much older man, their love affair had produced Balzac's only child, a girl called Marie Caroline, born in 1834. Oh la la! And Balzac's amours did not end there. In February 1832, Balzac received a mysterious letter which did not have a return address. It was postmarked from the Ukrainian city of Odessa and was signed simply L'étranger, or the foreigner. The letter was in response to Balzac's book La Peau de Chagrin, and it expressed sadness at the work's cynicism and negative portrayal of women. Balzac decided to reply to the anonymous letter via a classified ad in the Gazette de France, with the hopes the letter's author would see it. This began a 15-year correspondence between Balzac and the author of the letter, Evelina Hanska. Like Maria de Fresnay, Evelina was also married to a much older man. The two letter writers became very fond of each other during their passionate and thought-provoking correspondence, so much so Balzac described her as the object of his sweetest dreams. Oh la la, Balzac, a romantic after all. When Evelina's husband died in 1841, the two were able to properly pursue their relationship. That said, Balzac had some competition. In fact, the gallant composer and pianist Franz Liszt, whom we met in episode 10 of the podcast, was also trying to woo her. The realist versus the romantic. And it would be the realist who would be victorious in the battle over the belle Ukrainian's heart. That didn't mean it was straight to the altar for the two lovebirds. After years of jumping through hoops, the Tsar Nicholas I, then the ruler of the Ukraine, finally granted the couple permission to wed, which they did after an arduous journey in March 1850, something which took its toll on Balzac's health. Upon returning to Paris, the writer's health continued to worsen, and he unfortunately passed away on August 18th, 1850, at 51. Only 5 months after he was officially wed. Fellow literary legend Victor Hugo had visited him earlier on the day of his death, and during his eulogy to Balzac at his memorial service, Hugo said, "Today we have people in black because of the death of the man of talent, a nation in mourning for a man of genius." The greatest writers of the era attended his funeral, including Alexandre Dumas, père et fils. The writer's legacy left its mark on both writers of his generation and those to come, including Émile Zola, Gustave Flaubert, Charles Dickens, and Henry James. In addition to his real-life lovers, Balzac also wrote 2 treatises on marriage, The Psychology of Marriage and Scenes of Conjugal Life. Written before he himself was married, and only based on his observations of his sisters and his lovers' marriages instead of first-hand experience, the works did garner some criticism. Romance, or rather relationships, did come up in his works. The best example might be his book Le Lys dans la Vallée, or The Lily of the Valley. Okay, my choice of this work as an example might not be the most subjective. However, the story is one of love, and impossible love, never consummated, between young aristocrat Félix de Vandenesse and Madame de Mortsauf, the virtuous wife of the Count de Mortsauf. The story is told via a letter from Félix to his then-lover, the Countess Nathalie de Manerville. I thought I would read you a short extract from the beginning. "I yield to your wishes. It is the privilege of the women whom we love more than they love us to make the men who love them ignore the ordinary rules of common sense." Oh la la! Passionate romancing in the 19th century. A talented writer that he most certainly was. Good with money, he definitely was not. Throughout his adulthood, Balzac developed a bad pattern for getting involved in speculating and business deals which often went awry. Obviously, he should have stuck to writing. This brings us to the charming cottage in the 16th arrondissement.
If you're enjoying this episode of Romancing in Paris, you may be interested in our sister podcast, Don't Miss This. It comes out every Sunday and has a fabulous roundup of the best and coolest events taking place in Paris during the week. Romancing in Paris will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Romancing in Paris.
Between 1840 and 47, in an effort to flee his creditors, Balzac rented the top floor of this tiny house under the name of his housekeeper, Monsieur de Brignoles. It was in this modest apartment here that he edited La Comédie Humaine and wrote some of his most exceptional novels, including Rabouilleuse, The Black Sheep, Une ténèbre affaire, A Murky Business, and La Cousine Bette, or Cousin Bet. Shall we pop by for a visit? Acquired by the city of Paris in 1949, the House Museum is accessed via a new modern entrance off of Rue Renoir, a street which descends from the village-like Place du Costa Rica, above Metro Passy. Before you even enter, you'll be caught by the spectacular view of the Eiffel Tower. In my opinion, one of the nicest surprise views of the tower in the whole city. As a City of Paris museum, it's free if there isn't an exhibit taking place. Otherwise, there's a small entrance fee. Set within a dainty garden, once you enter the cottage, to the left is the former kitchen. This has a cheeky cupboard inside of which are images of Balzac's various lovers. So don't miss out on this. The rest of the top floor gives an overview of Balzac, his works, and praise from other writers and historic figures. There are also sculptures, prints, and photographs of the author. Look out for his famous cane, which apparently had magic powers, and is brandished by part of a turquoise necklace of Evelina's daughter, Enna. His office, with the writer's desk and chair, is another highlight. You can imagine him writing away, burning the midnight oil, or rather the 1 a.m. oil. A whole room is also dedicated to the printing blocks of various characters from La Comédie Humaine. The basement level is where the temporary exhibits are displayed. After you visit the museum, you can grab a coffee and a treat at the museum's café, which is run by the team of the famous Rose Bakery. If you can, plan to go when the weather is nice, and you can savor tea time, or even just a quiet moment with your chérie in the garden, with those splendid views of La Tour Eiffel. If you would like to pay further homage to Balzac, you can visit his tomb at Père Lachaise Cemetery, or take a look at the statue of him created by Auguste Rodin. Called the Monument to Balzac, it stands proudly at the intersection of Boulevard Raspail and Boulevard Montparnasse in Place Pablo Picasso in the south end of the 6th District. Or why not pick up a copy of one of his books? The Lily of the Valley, perhaps? Thank you for listening to this latest edition of Romancing in Paris. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. That way you won't miss the next one. Ratings or reviews get a big je t'aime from me. If you would like to discover more romantic places in the district, see my website jetaimemeneither.com for my guides to the top romantic spots per arrondissement of Paris. This podcast was produced by Paris Underground Radio. Check out their website if you're interested in listening to more great podcasts on Paris. Until next time, happy romancing in Paris.
This episode of Romancing in Paris was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please visit parisundergroundradio.com.